Welcome and happy Juneteenth to you. Again, I'm Jonathan McCoy. I'm Vice President of the Martin Luther King Jr. Association of Asheville and Buncombe County. We're working in conjunction with Asheville City to put on, again, as we've been talking about, a week of events to celebrate Juneteenth and to celebrate the community of Asheville and the diversity that we have and the intersection that we have, that we are all connected to make this community strong and vibrant. We all come to it from different pathways. We're all made up of different ways, but we all are united. We all have our humanity in common. And only if we can keep that commonality together can we have a community. Common unity is what we're celebrating this week. And as we go forward, we have this event today. Tomorrow we have a couple more events. We'll have another lunch and learn, and then we have our gala tomorrow night. Then we have a lunch and learn on Friday and downtown after 5. There are flyers at the table as you go out the door. As you came in the door, there are flyers there that list the events and the lunch and learns, and Dr. Simmons will tell you a little bit more about it at the end of our event today, location and the subject matter. The main thing is as we celebrate community, a couple of things. First of all, last year we had lunch and learns and we had planned them and said, okay, we're going to look for places that have about seating for 50 people. And each lunch and learn, we were under that. You know, this year, we've been over that, which is great. Which means that there is an interest in not only history, but also what is going on in the present as we try to set the stage and move forward in a positive manner into the future. But yes, it's been so, as people say, well, why are y'all in this small space? Well, because it's been all right, but now we're gonna have to look to branch out if we can keep this momentum going at all events, not just events that we have, but events throughout the city, events with other organizations that we have throughout the year, that we can keep a momentum of interest and activity, then we have momentum to move forward. And so we celebrate you and us as a community. We celebrate that we have members of our administration, our government that shows up. We're thankful for Terry Wells, the Buncombe County Commissioner, for being here with us tonight, or this afternoon. Not only her, but again, y'all for making the time, taking the time. Yes, it's a holiday, and you could easily be home, sleeping in, on the grill, hiking, or anything else, but you've made the time and effort to come and share this time and space with one another. And so we thank you for that. So usually I give a background to a historical context of why we're here, and then we have our event that goes on. This time there's no historical context, but I do give background information of our featured speaker. Mary D. Williams is a gospel singer, a historian, and a storyteller. She's from my town of Durham. We were just catching up, being a Durham person, myself and her. We were connecting in being from that triangle area. So not everybody understands the 919. But being from Durham, she is also known to have a voice reminiscent of Mahalia Jackson, noted gospel songstress, noted inspiration who Dr. King would contact to be lifted up. And the reason Mrs. Williams has that voice reminiscent of Mahalia Jackson, because her vocal spirit is known to soothe troubled minds and lift heavy hearts. She has spent a lifetime ministering in local churches and festivals and various events, including at the National Council of Negro Women Incorporated in Washington, D.C. She's performed at the Kennedy Center, also in Washington, D.C., Walnut Creek Amphitheater in Raleigh, North Carolina, Duke University Chapel there in Durham, and at the Bobby Jones Gospel Recording Retreat in Las Vegas, just to name a few. She has traveled with the United Methodist Western Conference And for over a decade, she traveled with Duke Divinity professor Dr. Timothy Tyson, who's author of the acclaimed book, Blood Done Signed My Name. And they toured the nation doing conversation-style book tours, furthering work towards racial reconciliation in communities. I teach North Carolina history at Mars Hill University, where I'm a professor of history. And the book I've always used as a supplement is Blood Done Signed My Name. And so again, it was that crossover, we were talking about that, of you never know what's going on, but also those intersections that you're not aware of, and then when you're made aware of, what do you do with that commonality? In 2015, now again, I'm a state grad for graduate school, but I do not hold it against her. 2015, she graduated from UNC Chapel Hill. She is a Tar Heel. She earned a degree in American Studies and minor in History and African American Studies, and then also went on from Carolina to earn her master's in folklore. So she's Carolina, but she also Duke and over in Wake County, so she is definitely across the community. She has received the Female Vocalist of the Year at the North Carolina Gospel Announcer Guild's Prestige Award Ceremony. She keeps herself busy ministering the Word of God throughout the eastern half of the United States. She's a specialist in ministering to women who are struggling with marital challenges. Mrs. Williams has said that African American slaves talked about the power of the music. It was a way of communicating something over and above what the overseer could understand. The slave community understood exactly what every song meant. It was a way of escape. The thing about the songs of the enslaved is that they always looked upward. I'm not in slavery, but there are still issues and concerns of our day and trials and tribulations. And the power of a song is a way that you can deliver your own soul. Mrs. Williams is not only an acclaimed vocalist, but she is also an adjunct professor at Duke University and Wake Tech. She's a devoted wife, a mother of 3 young men, and a loving grandmother of 3 grandsons. If that wasn't enough, she is working on her first book, which is about Mahalia Jackson. And on top of all that, she owns her own women's apparel business known as Mrs. WMS Accessories. We are very thankful that she made her way up the mountain from Durham to be with us today and to inspire us and guide us with song and stories. Mrs. Mary D. Williams.
How I got over, how I got over, you know my soul looks back and wonders. Author Krista Dixon writes, Krista writes that the intolerable suffering becomes tolerable when the end is in sight, or when something beautiful transforms ugliness. In this way, this is how these coded messages, in terms of the spirituals, not only provided a possible end in sight, but also offered a sense of hope and beauty to those that sang them. Singing was tolerated on the plantations and even encouraged, as slave masters considered it to be a method of increasing their productivity on the plantations, even particularly here in North Carolina, considering or coordinating the rhythm as they would work. The music would keep the workers' minds occupied, resulting in less of a chance of complaining or even coming together plotting. Little did the slave master know that the coded messages for escape were being exchanged right up under their noses. One song could travel at least 100 miles. They would start one song and it would pass from plantation to plantation as they would summons each other to come from meetings down in the bush harbor. They would sing songs, and he told me I need to use the mic, that would transmit messages. Steal away, steal away, steal away home. I ain't got long to stay here. Now listen to this lyric. My Lord, He calls me. He calls me by the thunder. Now when it thunders, what does that mean? When you hear thunder? Storm's coming. The trumpet sounds within of my soul. I ain't got long to stay here. The enslaved understood meteorology better than meteorologists today. They understood the signs of the time. When that song was transmitted, there was an understanding. When it rains, dogs can't hunt, and the slaves and the plantation owner can't track. It was an opportunity to escape. The thunder sounds within my soul. I ain't got long to stay here. They would transfer these songs and sing them in a communal type sense. Throughout slavery, they maintained their culture and identity, and the songs were a method of maintaining this acculturation of being placed. Many of the enslaved, as we have found journals historically, have acclaimed that when many of the slaves were dropped off on the shores of Charleston, they actually thought that they had been in the ship and actually had gotten back home. And when they got off the ship, because the coastal line in Charleston resembled that of the African continent. And so they began to run and believe that they were back at home again until they saw the chains. In terms of as the enslaved began to acculturate to the culture in terms of working on the different plantations, in Raleigh, Mordecai Plantation, which actually became the city of Raleigh. Later on, the family sold the land to make it Raleigh. They had over 100 slaves, and there were only 7 family members. So they could have been an insurrection at any time. But they maintained themselves and would escape at different times on their way to what they believed to be Canaan land. There were storytellers, there were poets. They used music and they sang together in community to soothe and to repair their battered spirit. Slavery was concentrated most heavily, as we know, in the southern states, where the cash crop was cotton, tobacco, and sugar. This development of chattel property was fueled by racial, social, and economic belief to move forward from the older colonial model to indentured servitude. But they believed, swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Who knows that? Everybody, let's sing it. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Well, I look over Jordan, tell me what did I see? Coming for to carry me home. A band of angels coming after me, coming for to carry me home. Whoa, swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Whoa, swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Give yourselves a hand. Y'all sound mighty good to me. All right, now that's worth coming up the mountain for. So music became this primary communication. The enslaved coming from different tribes. They came from the Yoruba, the Igbo, the Wolof tribe, and they came with different languages. So this immersion into being here, where children, once they got off of the ship, could in 6 months understand and speak the English language. Whereas the adults were struggling because being from different tribes, they were speaking different languages. So they began to use pidgining, where they, and I put it to my students like this, that if you and I were working in a hot dog stand and folks came in and they said, I want 2 hot dogs all the way, and then me and you might say, I want 2 dogs walking. That's the pidgining. We made our own language. So we understand it where we're cooking. We understand what 2 dogs walking means. But that's not what would be understood in terms of socially, in terms of what they came in order. So they would do that, and they did it again through music. Through all of the different tribals, this way of communal management in terms of how they did things. They did not have a wide choice and means of recognizing each other in terms of their origin, in terms of their, because now they're all destined for slavery. Among them, again, the basic identity that they began to use communally was singing. It was against the law to play drums, beat drums. It was against the law for other kinds of instruments because of the communicative way that they used in their tribal customs to communicate with each other. So they began to forge this creativity of vocal expression. Simple music notes, rhythms, texts, expressions, stories from the Old Testament. They were able to provide them enough camouflage to mask the real subject that they were trying to communicate. They would stand in front of in the churches. They would allow them to come in sometimes and stand across in front of the church. And they would sing, I got a robe, you got a robe, all God's children got a robe. When we get to heaven, gonna put on the robe. We're gonna strut all over God's heaven, heaven, heaven. Well, everybody talking about heaven ain't going there. Frederick Douglass said in My Bondage and My Freedom, and he writes, a keen observer might have detected in our repeated singing of songs such as Old Canaan, Sweet Canaan, I'm bound for the land of Canaan, something more than a hope of reaching heaven. We meant it to reach the north. We knew that our north was our Canaan. It had a double meaning. On the lips of some, it meant the expectation of a speedy summons to a world of spirits, which was through the portal even of death. But the lips of our company, it simply meant a speedy pilgrimage toward a free state and deliverance from all the evils and dangers of slavery. End of quote. they would sing songs that were based on Old Testament scripture. Didn't my Lord deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel? Didn't my Lord deliver Daniel? And why not every man? If you don't know it, didn't my Lord deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel? Well, didn't my Lord deliver Daniel? And why not every man? Is that the best I can do, that he delivered Daniel? Okay, let's try it again. Yeah, they need another chance. You're for real, because we're being delivered, and that's all the excitement. All right, let's try it again. Didn't my Lord deliver Daniel? Deliver Daniel. Deliver Daniel. Well, didn't my Lord deliver Daniel? And why not every man? He knows he's next. Didn't my Lord deliver
Daniel,
deliver
Daniel,
deliver
Daniel?
Well, didn't my Lord deliver Daniel? And why not every man? He delivered Daniel from the lion den, Jonah from the belly of the whale, the Hebrew boys from the fiery furnace. Why not every man? Didn't my Lord deliver
Daniel,
deliver deliver? Oh, didn't my Lord deliver? And why not every man? Let's try it one more time. Did my Lord deliver
Daniel,
deliver
Daniel,
deliver?
Daniel,
Well,
didn't my Lord deliver Daniel?
And why not every? Last time, didn't my Lord deliver
Daniel,
deliver
Daniel,
deliver? Oh, didn't my Lord deliver? And why not every man? I have three amazing sons. They all three are college graduates, and they're just wonderful. Thank you. One went to the military and then went to college, and then the other two went straight to college. But they often tell me, say, Mama, you need to be on Ritalin. But I'm going to tell you something right now. This stuff right here is good to me. It is good to me. It's good to me. So I wanted to give you the backdrop in terms of slavery, because we can't get to Juneteenth until we do that. You have to set the backdrop. So as we come and approach the Civil War, more than that, because it begins to really this consciousness, this problem with humanity, this problem of being a human, recognizing that humanity in others in terms of the enslaved. The issue of slavery, the profits of slavery, began and sparked what many consider to have ignited the Civil War. The Confederacy shed their American identity. They cloaked themselves with Confederate nationalism. They cloaked themselves with the ideals and their vision of maintaining and holding on to slavery. The Confederacy. Confederate Vice President Alexander Stephens said this in 1861, and I quote, "Our new government is founded upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery's subordination to the superior race is his natural and normal condition." End of quote. He said it. That's an exact quote. President Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers to serve 3 months to oppose the rebellion of the American Civil War. Many of the enslaved began to leave the plantations when the war broke out, particularly in Wilmington, North Carolina. leaving and using words that they hadn't used. Now, they're using symbolically, and y'all repeat after me. This is call and response, all right? I'm on my way, to Canaan land. 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 Now, Canaan represented what it represented to the children of Israel. It represented, who said it? Freedom. It represented freedom. And they were in a place to escape, and they would use the portals of death to escape. Meaning that to get to the other side, that I should die. Ann Shepherd, who her mom's going to take this off. Ann Shepherd, who, thank you. Ann Shepherd, who sang with the Fifth Jubilee Singers, her mother was enslaved, and her mother and them, they were planning to escape. Ann Shepherd, as a little child, heard the plans, of course, being in the community, the slave cabins, and the parents were going to escape. The plantation owner, the mistress, began to feed Ann cookies. Ann Shepherd, and you can read about her at Fisk University, began to feed her cookies so that she could find out the plan of escape for the enslaved. They beat her mother brutally after Ann told everything, and she was just a child. And so they beat her brutally. She said, before my daughter will end up a slave, I will drown her. I want my daughter to be free. So she literally took her down to drown her. And one of the old mothers walked down behind and kind of saw what was going on. That's just like old grandma. Walked down and saw what was going on and said, don't harm the child. Was much later that Ann Shepherd ended up being the voice of the Fifth Jubilee Singers. And the spirituals, she and the Fifth Jubilee Singers were the first to introduce the spirituals outside the slave community. And it was because she was able to survive. But death was an option of being free. When they would escape to the Civil War Union lines, sometimes they were singing, oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom over me. Before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. So they would sing those songs as the Civil War begins. They would say that they owe nothing, even the Confederates and many others. Their statement was, we owe nothing to the black race. When in reality, we all know historically, it is historically sound that everything is owed because it would not have been a road, a house, land without toil and labor if it had not been for the black race. The very house that President Lincoln laid his head on was built by the backs of blacks while under the brutal lash of the whip. Many of the enslaved knew that they were no different than the Hebrew slaves that built Pharaoh's pyramids. That's why they could relate to the old biblical stories, because they knew that one day God was going to send a Moses. And that is why we reflect on, during the Civil Rights Movement, that sometimes Martin Luther King was called Delawd, D-E-L-A-W-D. Or sometimes he was referred to as Moses. They, like the children of Israel, wanted to be free from slavery. In Wilmington, North Carolina, Abraham Galloway began to gather many men and formed them as spies and to join the Union Army. He had a command of spies in Wilmington, North Carolina. The enslaved were, and he stated, Abraham Galloway said this. He said, the enslaved are the whirlwind. They are the thunder. They are the lightning. They are the downpour. They are the great deluge that shudders rock and washes away the stones. Although there were an increasing number of army commanders, they were reporting that a number of the formerly enslaved were escaping to freedom behind the enemy lines. There were testimonies by Richard Lawrence, who was enslaved by Mary Lawrence. Richard was hired out as a barber and worked in the field during the day, hired out as a barber at night. He was a spy under the command of Abraham Galloway. He would steal away long nights looking up at the stars. When he escaped to join Abraham Galloway in the Union Army, he understood that their situation was desperate. Even as they were gathering information and communicating with each other, he would walk by slave pens where seeing women, children in chains around their neck being sold. Many of them sold for thousands of dollars. Many of them for little of nothing. But the selling of a human being at the will of the slave master here in North Carolina. The auction block in Smithfield, North Carolina. In Fayetteville, just to name a couple. The prayers that were prayed by even some of the enslaved. Lord, why come me here? Lord, why come me here? Lord, why come me here? I wish I never was born. They took my children away, Lord. They took my children away, Lord. They took my children away, Lord. I wish I never was born. Some of the songs were prayers, pleading, asking God why. I couldn't hear nobody pray. I couldn't hear nobody pray. I couldn't hear nobody pray. I was way down yonder by myself, and I couldn't hear nobody pray. Down on my knees, I couldn't hear nobody pray. Lord, I couldn't hear nobody pray. I couldn't hear nobody pray. I was way down yonder by myself, and I couldn't hear nobody pray. David Walker, in the words of the fiery appeal, alive, the nameless ones, the doe-eyed slaves crying for freedom, he says, as John Brown's body lies smoldering in the grave. In May 1861, General Benjamin Butler went over the superiors' heads because there were so many of the enslaved joining the Union Army. He said that the only way to deal with this, because he was accepting fugitive slaves that came from Fort Monroe in Virginia. General Butler reasoned that the runaway slave, we will call them and deal with them as contraband of war. He realized that under the articles in terms of military warfare, that he had a right to seize them. Even though they voluntarily joined, he had a right to seize them, and he did any enemy horse or any enemy cannon, whatever enemy artillery that he was able to confiscate, he had the right to seize the slaves as contraband. This was during the interim. This is also the way that he was making use of black troops. One of the things that one of the generals stated when they only gave them spades and shovels to fight with. They did not give them any ammunition. But in Alabama, they were defeated so bad, the Confederacy, that the commander stood all the remaining troops, because out of 3,000, I think 650 were killed. He stood them all up. And in his words, these are his words, he said, after this, the Negroes will fight. Give them guns. So they started getting guns. Once the slave escaped to the Union lines, the master's claim was nullified, and they lived in contraband camps. 5,000 men, as a result of the meeting with Edward Kingsley, would actually begin at that juncture to begin to form what is known as the United States Colored Troops. They formed regiments 35th, 36th, and 37th. And the proclamation was issued, and 186,000 African-American men and women in disguise were ready to fight during the Civil War. The contraband saw their Canaan as a representation of freedom from slavery. They would sing, "Come by here, good Lord, come by here. Come by here, good Lord, come by here. Come by here, good Lord, come by here. Oh, Lord, come by here. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder, 'cause we're soldiers of the cross. Do you think I'll make a soldier? Do you think I'll make a soldier? Do you think I'll make a soldier? I'm a soldier of the cross. January 1, 1863, which is called Freedom's Eve, or the Eve of January 1, 1863, was the first watch night service that took place. Now, my students did not understand and realize that when their parents, particularly the African-American parents, took them to New Year's Eve services and it was called watch night, they didn't know where it came from. Y'all tell your children where this stuff is coming from. Let them know it didn't just pop up out of the sky or drop down. There's a method, there's a reason. Historically, it was called watch night service because they were watching for midnight. On December 31st, 1862, the enslaved and free African Americans gathered in secret to ring in the new year and await the news that the Emancipation Proclamation would take effect. Lincoln signed off on the Emancipation Proclamation September 22nd, 1862. It did not go into effect until January 1, 1863, after 12:01 midnight. They watched. President Abraham Lincoln issued the executive order declaring enslaved people in the rebelling Confederate States legally free. The decree would not take effect until the clock struck midnight at the start of the new year, again known as Watch Night or Freedom's Night. African Americans across the country watched and waited for news that they were free. On December 31, African Americans gathered in private homes, slave quarters, all across. It is stated that at midnight, and when the enslaved got the information that they were free, that some of the Confederate generals, when they went back to their plantations, their houses were so in disarray, and some had been burned down because of the Union Army, not because of the enslaved, but the Union Army, that they had to sleep in the slave cabins. I wonder how that felt. Those prayers were answered, and all enslaved people of the Confederate States were declared legally free. Frederick Douglass says, "It is a day of poetry. It is a day of song, a new song. These cloudless skies, this balmy air, this brilliant sunshine are in harmony with the glorious morning of liberty that is about to dawn upon us." End of quote. Union soldiers marched into plantations and in the cities reading copies of the Emancipation Proclamation and spreading the news. Many were singing, "Over my head, I hear freedom in the air. Over my head, I hear freedom in the air. Over my head, ooh, I hear freedom in the air. There must be a God somewhere." Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation declaring 3 million slaves living in Confederate States to be made free. The 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution abolished slavery and indentured servitude. However, the news of emancipation traveled slowly, especially in the southern states. For example, when Board versus Education came into being, and that was set into motion, in my town, the Raleigh-Garner area where I live, it took them 15 years to apply for that. And then they did it on a priority blacks, where they had to apply. Black children had to apply to go to the schools that were supposed to be interracial. So we see that Juneteenth, celebrating the anniversary of the Texas Emancipation, June 19, 1865, 2.5 years later. Major General Granger led 2,000 Union troops to the Galveston Bay area in Texas to deliver the message of freedom. Do you think I'll make a soldier? Do you think I'll make a soldier? Do you think I'll make a soldier? I am a soldier of the cross. 250,000 enslaved black people in the state were freed by executive order, and the Union soldiers were there to enforce the decree. Texans celebrated freedom with prayer, feasting, song, and dance. Each year after freedom, there was a celebration that took place in Texas, making it an annual tradition. The songs that have come through oral tradition, as I prepare to close, and are part of the African American culture, that is through oral tradition of words and songs that were passed down through the ages. I learned them from my grandmother. I have had no vocal training, so I don't know notes. I can't play any instrument or anything. But my grandmother would sing as she was in the kitchen cooking, and so I would capture those songs, and I don't know, it was something about them that hung on to me and stayed within me. and the hymns and I remember when I was introduced, Jonathan mentioned that I had been to Vegas for the Bobby Jones show. So I'd done, sung this song. I was in Las Vegas, and I was on the stage, and so I started singing, Nearer, my God, to thee, nearer to thee. So I sang it all the way through. Then he comes down on stage and he gets the mic and he starts singing with me. Then at the end of the show, after the broadcast and everything, he was like, you're going to really go far if you sing something a little bit more contemporary. I don't want to do that. I cried all the way back home. My husband was like, what's wrong with you? I said, I don't want to sing contemporary gospel. So I can say truly that a place has been provided for me. Had no idea that it would be through education, but I'm so grateful that there was a place. He made a place for me. And so I'm able to talk about this music and the power and the context of it in terms of history. Spirituals are folk songs created by anonymous, uncelebrated poets who were enslaved on plantations in the American South. Through the persistence and popularity, they have formed an important and inspiring repertoire of songs. However, one of the challenges of the spirituals is that they were born out of the oral tradition, and the inconsistencies sometimes in the text, the repetitiveness as a part of memorization. The entire section of text gets changed as it begins to infiltrate the body of people in which it is shared. It has that kind of power. You know, and I know, music doesn't ask your permission. Can I get a witness? Right? If you're happy and hear a sad song, it'll tear you all to pieces. And if you're sad and hear a happy song, it'll dry your weeping eyes. It doesn't ask you anything. It just does what it does. It's been shared by generations, plantation to plantation, word of mouth, and sometimes even the significance of children learning this newfound freedom, even through song, while they were working, whatever the situation, and it still applies today. It applies to, as we listen to our young and upcoming folks using music when it came to all aspects of protests, sit-ins, marches, whatever the situation, they're using music. The Reconstruction era gave hope. So much uncertainty to those that were formerly slaves. The goal to reunify families. A lot of times my students don't understand that. When I start showing them articles that after Emancipation Proclamation, women started looking for their husbands. They started looking for their children. There's a book by Heather Williams that is titled, Help Me Find My People. And she actually goes through and shows the different articles where men and women would work and put articles in newspapers. My son was short with woolly hair and black eyes, and all the description that they could give to find their people. Learning about citizenship when they did not know what that looked like. My nephew bought his mom a car, and she was riding around and had this thing in the back of her with her seat, and she just driving around, and so he was like, Mama, why don't you use the adjustment and adjust it? Oh, I didn't know it was there. What do you do with something you don't know what to do with it? If you don't know, you don't know. Women did not know how to manage their homes because they had been under the demand of someone else telling them what to do, left, make a right, do this, do that. So all of this, churches got involved and began to literally help and bring people up so that they could fit into society. I want to thank you all for having me today. And one of the things that was so important that they used actually during the Civil Rights Movement was a song that was so powerful because they were always understanding that everything they do was leading them to something else. I'm trying to get ready. I'm trying to get ready.
I'm trying to get ready. My grandma said, when you moan, the devil don't know what you're talking about. Ready to try on my long way road. I'm trying to get ready. I'm trying to get ready. I'm trying to get ready. Ready to try on my long white robe. Thank you, Miss Simmons. Thank you all for having me.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Williams, for bringing us to church, letting us enjoy some time together. Just before we got started, I was thinking, I said, this is going to be just like church because everybody was in the back. And then just before she really got going to get started, the front filled up. And I said, okay, it's going to be church. You know, I grew up in the Baptist. You know, you're not a good Baptist if you're sitting up front. You know, the word sounds different in the back. But I'm glad that we're able to fill the house. And again, it has been wonderful to see. This is the third day of our Lunch and Learns, and this overcrowding that has happened. We had to send somebody out there to the Ingalls on Haywood, so he's going to pick up some more food because we're like, you know, there's people coming, so there will be some more food here. But think about this, that Monday we were remembering Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner. The three, as they call them, Mississippi murders. The movie Mississippi Burning is based on their murders that happened 60 years ago this Friday. And their bodies were discovered in August. And we talked about the interconnection of our communities, that you had this fight for voter rights because what was happening in Mississippi, that black people weren't being allowed to vote, and they were being killed for trying to vote. Before those three were killed, two other civil rights workers have been killed in May, going down there to register. And again, when we talk about these workers, the movement happened because young people from elementary through college got out and put their lives on the line. And as they searched for those three young men, they found 8 other bodies. And 3 of them were civil rights workers. They could never identify. Well, they could only identify 2. The third they knew was a worker because of the shirt. He had a core shirt on, Congress on racial equality. But the other 5, we've never known who they are. But again, you think about this whole thing of people being killed because trying to enjoy the equality that Juneteenth is celebrating, this idea of moving to live out what the Constitution says. But also, Juneteenth is a reminder that there are always forces that are going to work against that happening. So we have to be conscious in effort to make it happen. That's one reason there's that starburst on the flag for Juneteenth. We have to have energy. And then yesterday, our Lunch and Learn talked about first families, talked about how do you really research your family history, your family tree? How do you find your extended family, your relatives, the stories you know, but the people you don't know? Because it's just like Mrs. Williams said, in Juneteenth, we know, I talked about yesterday, the scattering, but it happened all over the South. Enslaved people searching, and you go back and you look at the newspapers, there are all these ads of looking for. But think about this. Through those two things and the interconnection that they have and what Mrs. Williams was saying with the songs, those songs were known across the region. I always talk about, my father was a minister, and I always talked about, it's the same song we learned in Durham, but we sing it at a different tempo than they do in Asheville, and they might have a couple of different words down there in Greenville, but it's the same song. But think about it, this was before the internet, before cell phones and everything else, that the word got spread, the information was spread. So that again shows us our common unity, but how easily we forget that and find ways to stay divided. And so the inspiration for today was to remind us of our community. And again, as people have come and more have come, it's interesting and very thankful, and we're happy that we've had members of our government, our local, our county, to show up in support of our community. So I asked if any of our government officials are here, even if named you at the beginning, if you have come in, if you just raise your hand so we can see who has come and we can make sure, it's important, we can see who is taking part in our community. Because a lot of people will claim, especially in an election year, a lot of people will claim, hey, I'm working for the community, I'm part of the community, but if the community's never seen them, how are they making that claim? So that's one reason we point that out. Who is actually making the effort to come in? But also give yourselves a hand for making the effort to come here today on a holiday in the heat and be here. So give yourselves. And so as we get ready to close, I'm going to ask Dr. Orlean Simmons, the founder of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Association of Asheville and Buncombe County, and also our president, to come here and give us a couple announcements of things that are going on, things she wants to share with you real quick, and then we'll be finished up. And I also saw that the food came in, so we'll have a little bit more.
Now I'm going to give you another chance. Please give another round of applause for Marion Reed. And would you like to extend an invitation to her to come back again next year? I'll put the contract in the mail tomorrow.
That's good. Beat the rush. That's a good idea.
You're on our calendar. I get to say thank you. I get to say thank you to all of you for being here today and celebrating with us. Today is the official holiday that has been proclaimed by the president, the governor, the county commission, and City Hall. And I see the city manager back there smiling. So I get to say thank you. I also want to thank all of our sponsors that's listed on the banner here. First is the City of Asheville, the Dr. Martin Luther King Association, Dogwood Trust Health, AB Tech Community College, Mission Health, Givens Community, Advent Health, Asheville Downtown Association, Beer's Beer, Explorer Asheville, and New Belgian Brewer. We kindly thank them for their support. Jonathan did, thank you. I I also thank Jonathan McCoy, our Vice President, who has been working for some time, helping to put all of these programs together and make them available to us. A few of our association board members have joined us today. I'd like to recognize them, Dr. Elizabeth Colton, Vanessa Funderburk, David King. Am I omitting someone that came in and I didn't see you? So, this is my thank you for this evening. And in closing, I'd like to invite you again to help yourself to the refreshment table there. We also have carryouts, and we have lemonade and red punch. And I'm going to ask Jonathan if he'll please tell the story of the red punch and why we invite people to drink the red punch on Juneteenth Day. Back to Jonathan.
Well, I'll be real quick. The red punch that represents Juneteenth, and it's been a tradition, really again comes out of Juneteenth out of Texas. They called tea down there. It had hibiscus and some other ingredients that made it red, but really it was a sweet drink to help people remember the pain and suffering of enslavement. It represents the blood that happened through those hundreds of years of enslavement, blood that was shed, lives that were lost. And also as a remembrance after Juneteenth that things weren't over, that there still was blood being shed and a fight for equality that continues. So the red punch represents that remembrance of that. But also in keeping the flags that you see is Juneteenth. And the reason that the Juneteenth flag is red, white, and blue is also to remind everyone that those enslaved people, those freed people, are Americans. And this is American history. And Juneteenth is an American holiday. So thank you for coming. I hope that you enjoy today, find a way to celebrate or continue to celebrate, find a way to get cool and stay cool, and hopefully we'll see you at another Lunch and Learn as the week goes on. If not, at least maybe at downtown at 5. But please, everyone be blessed, be safe, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Oh, and there are 4 CDs of Miss Williams that are on the table. If anybody's interested, they're $10, and she's saying cash, check, or her Cash App information is over there too. So please feel free, but enjoy.